The story of Sadhguru's thought begins in the quiet hills of Karnataka, where a boy named Jaggi Vasudev grew up surrounded by the sounds of birds, the scent of incense, and the rhythm of daily chores. From an early age, he listened to his grandparents tell old tales of sages who sat under trees and spoke of truth. Those tales were not just stories. They were the first threads that would later become a strong rope of practice. The threads came from the great Indian spiritual tradition that has been alive for thousands of years. In that tradition, a student learns from a teacher, a relationship called the guru-disciple model. The teacher shows the way, the student follows, and together they walk a path toward inner calm. This model is simple. The teacher is like a lamp. The student is the oil that burns bright when the lamp is lit. One of the oldest lights in that tradition is the work of Adi Shankaracharya, a philosopher who lived about 1,200 years ago. Shankaracharya wrote that the world we see is like a dream, and that the true self is beyond the dream. He put this idea in a short line that reads, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, which means the absolute is real, the world is illusion. He also taught that the mind can be quieted through a practice called yoga, which means union or joining. The word yoga appears in an ancient collection called the Yoga Sutras, written by a sage named Patanjali. The Yoga Sutras are a set of short statements that guide a person to calm the mind, focus on breath, and see the world more clearly. In plain language, the sutras say that when the mind stops jumping from thought to thought, a person can feel a deep peace. These early ideas formed the soil in which Sadhguru's later teachings would grow. When Jaggi was a teenager, he began to wonder why people in his village seemed content while he often felt restless. He asked his father, a man who believed in hard work and honesty, why the old stories mattered. His father replied, when a child learns to ride a bike, the first wobble feels scary, but the moment the child finds balance, the ride becomes joy. That simple picture of learning to balance on a bike is a perfect way to see the early teachings. The child first leans, then steadies, then rides. In the same way, a seeker first leans on a teacher, then steadies the mind, then moves forward on his own. Another everyday picture comes from a kitchen. A chef learns a new recipe by watching an older cook, tasting each step, and practicing the movements until the dish tastes just right. The chef does not simply copy. The chef feels the heat, the texture, the timing. Over time, the chef can add a pinch of spice that makes the dish unique. This is how the early teachings work. The student watches, tastes, practices, and eventually creates his own flavor of truth. Sadhguru often says that the teachings are like a seed. The seed needs water, sun, and soil to grow, and each person provides the care that makes the seed sprout in a different way. The guru-disciple model that Sadhguru inherited is not a rigid rule. It is more like a friendship that respects the teacher's experience while allowing the student to ask questions. In the ancient texts, the teacher is called a guru, which simply means one who knows the way. The student is called a shishya, which means one who follows. The relationship is built on trust, respect, and a shared goal of seeing deeper reality. In the modern world, this relationship can happen in a class, a workshop, or even through a video. Sadhguru uses the old model but adapts it to the age of the internet, allowing many people to sit at the same virtual fire. The early influences on Sadhguru also include the spread of yoga in the 20th century. In the late 1800s, a monk named Swami Vivekananda traveled to the United States and spoke at the World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago. He showed the world that yoga was not just a set of exercises, but a way to calm the mind and open the heart. His talks sparked interest in the West, and many teachers began to travel across the globe, sharing the practice. This wave of yoga reaching new lands created a sense that ancient teachings could live in modern cities. When Jaggi later opened his own center, he was standing on a platform built by those earlier teachers who had taken the old words out of quiet temples and placed them on busy streets. A second historical anecdote comes from a local festival that took place in the town of Mysore when Jaggi was 24. The town held a yearly celebration of the river with music, dance, and a fire that burned through the night. During that night, a group of villagers gathered around the fire and asked Jaggi to speak about what he felt when he sat quietly under a tree. He stood, took a deep breath, and said, "The fire is like the mind. When the wood is fresh, it burns bright. But when the wood is old, it sputters. The mind needs fresh thoughts, not old worries." The crowd listened, and that talk became his first public sharing of a teaching. The memory of that fire stays with him, and later sections of the video will return to that image when talking about practice and modern relevance. Sadhguru's early teachings also draw from the idea that the world is a mirror of the inner self. In the Yoga Sutras, there is a short line that says, "Yoga Sitta Vritti Nirodha," which means yoga is the stopping of the mind's waves. In simple terms, it says that when the mind stops tossing thoughts like waves, a person can see what is truly inside. Sadhguru often repeats this idea, saying that the mind is like a restless monkey that jumps from branch to branch. When the monkey learns to sit still, the person can see the sky clearly. This image is easy for many people to picture, and it links the ancient line to everyday life. Critics have raised two main objections to Sadhguru's teachings. The first group calls the ideas too mystical. They argue that talking about energy fields and inner dimensions sounds like fantasy rather than fact. They say that a teacher should stay with what can be measured, not with what feels good. In response, Sadhguru points to simple experiments. He asks a student to sit quietly for 5 minutes and notice the breath. When the breath slows, the student feels a change in the body. He says that this change can be felt, even if it is not yet written in a lab report. The critic's point is that the language can sound strange, but the experience can be real for those who try it. The second objection comes from skeptics who question whether ancient texts still matter in today's fast world. They ask, why should a modern person read a 1,000-year-old book when technology changes every day? They worry that old ideas may hold people back. Sadhguru answers by comparing a recipe from a great chef of the past with a new dish made today. The old recipe gives a base of flavor, a method that can be changed, but the core taste remains. In the same way, ancient teachings give a base of practice that can be updated for new times. He also notes that many modern scientists study meditation and find that it can lower stress and improve focus, showing that old practice can have new proof. Real applications of the early teachings show up in many places. A student who learns to quiet the mind can focus better on schoolwork, just as a child who learns to balance on a bike can ride farther without falling. A chef who masters a recipe can serve food that nourishes both body and mind. In a corporate office, a manager who practices a short breathing exercise can stay calm during a crisis, making better decisions. In a hospital, a nurse who uses a moment of stillness can be more present with patients, giving them comfort. These examples show that the early ideas are not locked in a temple. They can be used in everyday life. Later in the video, the narrator will return to the idea of practice. The early teachings about quieting the mind become a daily routine of breathing, walking, or simply watching thoughts pass like clouds. The modern relevance section will show how the old Yoga Sutras can be read alongside new research on brain health. By keeping the story of the child on a bike and the chef in the kitchen, the video will remind viewers that practice is a step-by-step journey, not a sudden leap. A quote from Adi Shankaracharya that often appears in Sadhguru's talks is, "Maya is the veil that covers the true self." In plain words, it says that the world can hide the real nature of a person. Sadhguru uses this line to explain why many people feel lost in daily worries. He adds, "When the veil lifts, the sky is always there." Another primary source quote comes from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Sutha Sukham Asanam, which means the posture should be steady and comfortable. Sadhguru tells a story of a man trying to sit in a hard chair for meditation. When the man adjusts the chair to be comfortable, his mind can stay steady. The quote shows that the body must be at ease for the mind to settle. The spread of yoga in the 20th century also gave a new shape to the old teachings. When a group of Indian teachers traveled to the United States in the 1960s, they taught yoga as a set of postures that could be done in a gym. This shift made yoga popular, but it also left out the deeper parts about the mind. Sadhguru's work tries to bring both back together. The body moves and the mind watches. He often says that a body without a calm mind is like a car without brakes. The car can go fast, but it can also crash. The calm mind is the brake that keeps the ride safe. The festival fire that inspired Sadhguru's first public talk also shows how a simple event can spark a lifelong path. The fire's heat reminded him of the mind's heat, and the crowds listening reminded him that a teacher can share a spark. Later, when he opened the Isha Foundation, he built a large space called the Dhyanalinga, a place where many people can sit in silence together. The idea of gathering around a fire to share wisdom lives on in that hall, where the light is soft and the air is still. The guru-disciple model also appears in modern classrooms. A teacher may not wear a robe, but the respect for knowledge remains. When a student asks a question, the teacher answers with patience, just as an ancient guru would sit under a tree and answer seekers. Sadhguru often tells the story of a young monk who asked his master why the sky is blue. The master replied, "Because the mind sees it that way." The story shows that even simple questions can lead to deep insight. In the modern world, the idea of inner engineering, a term Sadhguru uses for his program, is built on the same foundation as the Yoga Sutras. The sutras say that the mind can be trained like a muscle. Sadhguru adds that the body, the breath, and the emotions are all part of the same system. He compares it to a kitchen again. The chef must control heat, timing, and ingredients. If one part is off, the dish does not taste right. By training each part, a person can feel balanced. A second counter-argument comes from people who say that the guru-disciple model can lead to blind faith. They worry that a student might follow a teacher without questioning, which could be dangerous. Sadhguru's answer is simple. A true teacher encourages questions. He says that a lamp that only shines in one direction does not help a traveler. A lamp that can be turned in any direction helps the traveler see many paths. He invites seekers to test the teachings on themselves, not just accept them because a guru says so. The early teachings also stress the importance of nature. In the hills where Sadhguru grew up, The sound of a river was a reminder of constant flow. He often says that the river teaches us to keep moving. To let go of the story of inner engineering begins with a simple idea: that the breath, the way one sits, and the way one thinks can shape the whole day. In the early 2000s, Sadhguru noticed that many people were looking for quick fixes for stress, for lack of focus, for a feeling that life was moving too fast. He saw that the same patterns appeared in students before an exam, in drivers stuck in rush hour traffic, and in gamers who lose a round and feel a surge of frustration. He decided to put together a set of tools that could be taught in a short workshop. Tools that would let anyone pause, reset, and move forward with a clearer mind. The first inner engineering workshop took place in 2003 in a small hall near Mysore. A handful of curious listeners sat on the floor, some with eyes closed, some with a skeptical smile. Sadhguru began by asking them to notice the breath. He said that the breath is the bridge between the body and the mind. The breath is the link between the mind and the body, he said. He invited the group to take a slow, deep inhale through the nose, hold for a moment, and then let the exhale flow out gently. When the group tried this together, many reported a feeling of calm spreading through the chest, a quieting of the thoughts that had been racing. From that first day, the practice grew. It spread to cities across India, then to the United States, Europe, and many other places. The core of the method stayed the same. 3 simple pillars: breath, posture, and mindset. Each pillar is explained in a way that anyone can try, even without any previous meditation experience. Breath. The breath is the first pillar, because it is always with us. It can be used as a button that turns the nervous system down when it is too high, or that lifts the energy when it feels low. A nervous student before a test can sit at a desk, close the eyes, and count the breath in 4s. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. This simple box breathing pattern slows the heart rate, reduces the release of stress hormones, and lets the mind focus on the paper instead of on worry. Research shows that this kind of paced breathing lowers cortisol, the hormone that makes the body feel tense. A driver stuck in rush hour traffic can use the same breath to stay calm. Instead of honking or shouting, the driver can place a hand on the steering wheel, take a slow inhale through the nose, feel the air fill the lungs, then let the exhale flow out through the mouth. Repeating this a few times can turn a stressful moment into a short pause. The driver does not have to stop the car. The breath works while the car is still moving. The practice helps the driver keep a clear head, avoid aggressive reactions, and arrive at the destination with less tension. Gamers also find the breath useful. After a loss in a competitive match, a gamer may feel a surge of frustration that makes the next round harder. By pausing for a few breaths, inhaling slowly, holding and exhaling fully, the gamer can reset the nervous system. The breath acts like a reset button that clears the mind, allowing the player to focus on strategy rather than on the sting of defeat. Over time, this habit can improve performance, because the brain stays in a state that is ready to learn rather than stuck in anger. Sadhguru often says, "When the breath is calm, the mind follows." This simple rule is the backbone of the breath pillar. The practice does not require any special equipment, only the willingness to notice the flow of air in and out of the body. It can be done anywhere, in a classroom, in a car, in a gaming room, or even while standing in a field. Posture. The second pillar is posture. Posture is more than just how the spine looks. It is the way the body holds space, and it sends signals to the brain about safety and confidence. Sadhguru explains that a straight spine lets the breath move freely, and it also tells the nervous system that the body is ready for action. He often demonstrates a simple seated posture. Sit on a chair with the feet flat on the ground, keep the back straight, shoulders relaxed, and chin slightly tucked. The hands can rest on the knees, palms down. This posture is called the balanced seat in the inner engineering program. When a student sits for a test with a slouched back, the lungs have less room to expand, and the mind may feel cramped. By sitting tall, the student opens the chest, lets the breath flow deeper, and signals to the brain that the body is ready to think clearly. A simple experiment can be done. Sit for a minute with a slouched posture, then sit for a minute with a straight spine. Most people notice that the second minute feels more alert and less heavy. A driver can also benefit from posture. When stuck in traffic, many people lean forward, hunch their shoulders, and feel a tightness in the neck. By sitting up straight, rolling the shoulders back, and keeping the chin level, the driver reduces tension in the upper body. This not only eases physical discomfort, but also helps the breath move freely, which in turn lowers stress. Gamers often sit for long periods in a chair that may not support good alignment. By adjusting the chair, keeping the feet flat, and ensuring the back is straight, the gamer can prevent fatigue and keep the mind sharp. Good posture also reduces the risk of repetitive strain injuries, which can interrupt play and cause long-term problems. Sadhguru says, "When the spine is open, the mind is open. The mind is open." This short statement captures the link between the physical and mental aspects of the practice. The posture pillar does not demand a yoga mat or a special seat. It only asks for awareness of how the body is arranged in space. Mindset. The third pillar is mindset. Mindset is the set of thoughts and attitudes that shape how a person interprets events. Inner engineering teaches that the mind can be trained like a muscle using simple questions and reflections. One key practice is called inner observation. The student watches the thoughts that arise without trying to change them and then gently brings attention back to the breath. Over time, the mind learns to let go of repetitive worries and to stay in the present moment. A student before a test might think, "I will fail," and feel a surge of anxiety. By noticing this thought, labeling it as thought, and then returning to the breath, the student can break the loop of self-doubt. The mind learns that thoughts are not facts, and that they can be observed without being obeyed. A driver stuck in traffic may think, "This is a waste of time," and become angry. By observing this thought, and then focusing on the breath, the driver can shift from a negative appraisal to a neutral stance. The traffic becomes a moment for practice rather than a source of frustration. A gamer who loses a round may think, "I am bad," and feel shame. By noticing this thought, the gamer can let it pass and return to the breath, allowing the mind to stay calm and ready for the next round. The mindset pillar teaches that the quality of the inner dialogue matters more than the external outcome. Sadhguru often repeats the line, "The mind is a tool, not a master." This simple phrase reminds learners that thoughts can be used to help, not to control. The mindset pillar is about building a habit of gentle awareness, so that the mind does not become a source of endless chatter. Arguments for inner engineering. One clear argument for the practice is that it offers a practical way to manage stress in everyday life. The breath, posture, and mindset tools are easy to learn and can be applied in any situation. A student can use the breath before an exam, a driver can use posture and breath in traffic, and a gamer can use mindset after a loss. Each of these examples shows how the method fits into real life. not just into a meditation retreat. A second argument is that inner engineering brings together ancient wisdom and modern science. The focus on breath aligns with research on the vagus nerve and its role in calming the body. The emphasis on posture matches studies that link spinal alignment with better lung capacity and reduced pain. The mindset component mirrors findings from cognitive behavioral therapy, which teaches that observing thoughts can reduce anxiety. By blending these ideas, inner engineering offers a holistic approach that feels both timeless and current. Counterargument: marketing tool. Critics sometimes say that inner engineering is mainly a marketing tool designed to sell courses and books. They point to the high price of some workshops and the glossy videos that promote the program. They argue that the core ideas, breathwork, good posture, positive thinking, are already free and can be taught without a brand name. From this view, the method may be more about building a commercial empire than about genuine spiritual growth. Counterargument: similar techniques in other cultures. Another criticism notes that the techniques are not unique to Sadhguru. Breath control appears in yoga, in martial arts, in Buddhist meditation, and even in simple Western relaxation exercises. Good posture is taught in physiotherapy and in many fitness programs. Mindful observation of thoughts is a key part of mindfulness practices that have existed for centuries. Critics say that labeling these common tools as inner engineering may give the impression of novelty when the practices are already widespread. Responses to the counterarguments. Supporters respond that while the individual elements are not new, the way they are woven together into a single, easy-to-follow system is what makes inner engineering valuable. The program offers a clear sequence. First, the breath, then the posture, then the mindset. This sequence helps beginners see how each step supports the next. The branding also helps people find a consistent guide, rather than having to search through many different traditions. Another response points to the community aspect of the workshops. Participants often speak of the sense of belonging they feel when they join a group that practices together. The shared experience can deepen motivation and make the practice stick. In this sense, the program does more than sell a product. It creates a supportive environment for change. Historical anecdote: the first workshop. The first inner engineering workshop in 2003 was a modest event. It took place in a community hall that could hold about 50 people. Sadhguru arrived early, set up a simple wooden platform, and invited the attendees to sit on the floor. He began with a short talk about the importance of the breath, then guided the group through a 5-minute breathing exercise. After the exercise, many participants reported feeling lighter, as if a weight had lifted from their shoulders. One young man from a nearby village said, "I felt the storm inside calm down in just a few breaths." The success of that first day led to more workshops, and the program spread quickly through word of mouth. Historical anecdote: the farmer and the drought. A farmer from the state of Karnataka heard about inner engineering after a local teacher described the breath practice. The farmer was facing a severe drought that threatened his crops. He decided to try the breathing technique each morning before inspecting his fields. He sat on a stone, inhaled slowly, held, and exhaled fully, repeating the cycle for 10 minutes. Over the weeks, he noticed that his mind stayed calmer, even as the sky remained dry. He also began to stand taller while working, keeping his back straight, which reduced the ache in his lower back after long hours in the field. The farmer told his neighbors, "When the mind is steady, the work becomes easier, even when the rain does not come." His story spread, and many other farmers in the region started using the same practice during the dry season. The anecdote shows how the simple tools of breath, posture, and mindset can help people cope with difficult external circumstances. Quotes from primary sources. Sadhguru has spoken often about the three pillars. In one of his talks he said, "The breath is the first step to bring the mind inside. When the breath is steady, the mind finds a place to rest." In another lecture he added, "A straight spine is not just a physical state. It is a sign that the inner energy." The voice of the narrator moves gently through the idea that the self is not limited to the body or the mind. In the earlier Roots section, the story of Sadhguru's childhood in a small village was told. That story showed how the teacher first saw the world as a whole, not as separate parts. In the core concepts part, the notion of inner engineering was explained as a way to see the inner space. Now the focus turns to how Sadhguru describes the self and how that view fits with other thinkers. Sadhguru often says that the self is a field of awareness that can use a body, but it is not the body. He uses a simple picture of a smartphone. The phone has hardware, the metal, the screen, the battery. Those parts can be touched and seen. The apps that run on the phone are not the hardware. They can change, they can be deleted, they can be added. The phone can work without a particular app, and an app can be moved to another phone. In the same way, the body is like the hardware. The sense of being, the awareness, is like the apps. It can move, it can change, it can be present even when the hardware is not the same. The self, then, is not the hardware. A second everyday picture uses a garden. The soil in a garden holds water, nutrients, and space for roots. The plants that grow are the visible part that people notice. The soil can stay the same while many different plants grow and die. The soil also feeds new plants. The self can be seen as the soil. The thoughts, emotions, and actions are like the plants. They appear, they change, they fade, but the soil remains underneath. The soil does not disappear when a plant withers. That is why Sadhguru says the self is deeper than the mind and the body. These pictures help to see why Sadhguru says the self is not a limited thing. He often quotes the ancient text of Patanjali. Patanjali wrote, "Yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind." The word fluctuations means the constant moving thoughts and feelings. Patanjali's goal was to quiet those movements so that the true watcher could be seen. The watcher is the self that watches the mind, not the mind itself. Sadhguru connects this to the idea that the self is a quiet field that can observe the body and thoughts without being tangled in them. In the West, a famous thinker named René Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." He meant that the act of thinking proves that a thinking thing exists. For Descartes, the thinking thing was the mind, separate from the body. Sadhguru's view is similar in that it also separates the thinker from the body, but it goes further. He says the thinker is not the mind that thinks, but the space in which thoughts happen. That space is like a clear sky that holds clouds, but the sky itself stays empty when the clouds move away. The sky is not the clouds, just as the self is not the thoughts. The comparison shows a bridge between the ancient Indian view and the modern Western view. Both see a separation, but the Indian view adds the idea of a field that can hold many experiences. The Western view often stays at the level of the mind as the core. Sadhguru's language pushes the idea to a level that is even beyond the mind. The story of a village elder adds a human touch. In the village where Sadhguru grew up, an elder named Keshav would gather children under a large banyan tree. He would ask them, "Who are you when you are not playing, not eating, not sleeping?" The children would answer with names and jobs. Keshav would smile and say, "You are the wind that moves the leaves, not the leaves themselves." He meant that the true self is like the wind, invisible, moving, and not attached to any single leaf. This tale was passed down and is still told in the village. It shows how the idea of a self beyond the body was already alive in the local culture before Sadhguru began teaching. A later anecdote comes from a conference in the mid-1990s. The event was held in a hall in Bangalore, and scholars from many fields were present. A neuroscientist asked Sadhguru, "If the self is not the brain, how can you explain responsibility for actions?" Sadhguru answered, "The body and brain are tools. The driver can choose the road. The driver is still responsible for the choice, even if the car is not the driver." He used the image of a rider on a horse. The rider can steer, even though the horse provides the power. The rider's responsibility remains. This answer was recorded and later quoted in many articles. It shows how Sadhguru meets modern questions with simple images. The idea that the self is beyond the body raises questions. One common objection says that if the self is not the body, then a person cannot be held responsible for what the body does. The worry is that people might hide behind the idea of a distant self and avoid blame. Sadhguru's response is that responsibility lives in the field of awareness. He says, "When the driver sees the road clearly, the choice is obvious. When the driver is distracted, the crash happens. The driver cannot say the car caused the crash." In this way, the self remains the source of choice, not the body. The argument that responsibility disappears is therefore answered by pointing to the role of awareness in guiding actions. A second counter-argument comes from science. Some scientists argue that consciousness is a product of brain activity, and that saying the self is beyond the brain conflicts with experiments that link brain states to experiences. They point to brain scans that show different patterns when a person feels joy, pain, or thinks about themselves. The claim is that if the self were separate, those scans would not matter. Sadhguru meets this claim by saying that the brain is like a radio. The radio can produce music, but the music itself is not the radio. The music can be heard even when the radio is turned off, if it is recorded elsewhere. In the same way, the brain can broadcast the field of awareness, but the field is not created by the brain. He adds that science can study the radio, but it cannot capture the melody that exists beyond the hardware. This answer does not deny the data, but offers a different way to read it. Real-life examples illustrate how the view can be used. One example is a teacher who feels burnt out after many years of work. She begins a practice of sitting quietly each morning, noticing thoughts as clouds passing in the sky. Over weeks, she reports that she feels less tied to the stress of the classroom. She says she sees the stress as a passing plant in her garden, not as the soil. By seeing the self as the soil, she can let the stress grow and fade without feeling it is her whole being. This shows a practical benefit of the idea. Another example comes from a young athlete who suffered an injury that stopped his training. He felt that his identity was lost because he could no longer run. He turned to the analogy of the smartphone. He realized that his body was the hardware that had been damaged, but the apps, his love for the sport, his drive, his sense of purpose, could still run on a new device. He began a new sport that used his mind more than his legs. He felt that his self remained the same, even though the body changed. This story shows how the view can help people stay steady when circumstances shift. Modern thinkers have taken Sadhguru's ideas and placed them in new contexts. Psychologists talk about self-transcendence, which means seeing beyond the personal ego. They note that this can improve mental health. Others in the field of artificial intelligence use the smartphone analogy to discuss how a program can run on many machines. They say that the program's identity is not the hardware, similar to Sadhguru's claim. These modern interpretations keep the core idea alive and show its relevance. The discussion also returns to Patanjali's yoga. Patanjali's 8-step path includes idharana, which means concentration, and dhyana, which means meditation. Both steps aim to quiet the mind so the watcher can be seen. Sadhguru often says that the watcher is the self that is not the thoughts. He adds that when the mind is still, the self shines like a lamp in a dark room. The lamp does not need the darkness to be seen, but the darkness makes the light visible. This simple picture helps learners see why quieting the mind matters. Descartes' famous line, "I think, therefore I am," is also revisited. Some scholars argue that Descartes had meant the thinking thing is the proof of existence. Sadhguru would say that the proof is not the thinking itself, but the space where thinking happens. He might quote, "The mind is a mirror, but the mirror is not the images it reflects. The mirror can be clean or dirty, but the mirror itself stays. The self is the mirror, the thoughts are the images." This view keeps the spirit of Descartes while moving it a step further. The story of the village elder also connects to the modern garden analogy. The elder's wind metaphor and the garden soil picture both point to a base that holds many forms. The wind can move many leaves, the soil can hold many plants. Both show that the base is not the visible parts, but the invisible support. These stories were told in the early part of Sadhguru's teaching, and they continue to be used in talks today. The 1990s conference anecdote also links back to the earlier discussion of responsibility. The question about selfhood was one of many that tested the idea against modern science. Sadhguru's answer used the rider and horse picture, which is still quoted in articles about ethics. The rider cannot blame the horse for a wrong turn. The rider chose the direction. In the same way, the self that watches cannot blame the body for a thought. The choice is still there. A further everyday analogy uses a river. The water in a river flows over rocks, around bends, and sometimes floods. The river itself is the water, not the rocks. The rocks shape the path, but they are not the water. If the river changes course, the water still exists. The self can be seen as the water that moves through the body, which is like the riverbank. The water can flow into another river, just as the self can move into another body after death, according to some beliefs. This picture adds another way to see the self as fluid and not fixed. Another simple picture uses a book. The pages contain words, the cover holds them together, but the story lives in the mind of the reader. The story can be told in many languages, can be imagined in many ways, but the words on the page stay the same. The self is like the story that can be read by many bodies. The body is the page, the mind is the ink, but the awareness is the story that can be shared. The script also brings in a quote from Sadhguru that fits the theme. He once said, "The body is a vehicle, not the driver." This line makes clear that the driver decides where to go. The vehicle can break down, but the driver still exists. The quote is used to reinforce the idea that the self is the driver, not the hardware. A quote from Patanjali is also repeated for clarity. When the mind is still, the self shines. The word still means not moving, quiet. The self shines like a lamp when the mind stops moving. This short line helps listeners remember the point. The script also mentions a modern scientist, Dr. Anil Seth, who studies consciousness. He says that consciousness may be a model that the brain builds of the world. Sadhguru would respond that the model is like a map, but the territory is the field of awareness. The map can be drawn by many brains, but the territory exists beyond any single map. This shows how the idea can be spoken about alongside current research. In the final part of this segment, the narrator ties the ideas back to the earlier sections. Sadhguru has often spoken about the link between personal well-being and the health of the planet. He says that a calm mind and a clean earth are not separate goals. In his view, the inner state of a person is reflected in the outer world. When a person feels at peace, they tend to treat the land, water, and air with respect. When the environment is damaged, the mind feels heavy and restless. This simple idea is the core of his talks on nature, ecology, and spirituality. The roots of this idea go back to ancient Indian thought. The Vedas and the Upanishads talk about the unity of all life. A famous line from the Upanishads reads, "All that is one." This line means that the self and the world are not two separate things. Later, the Bhagavad Gita added the notion that one's duty, or dogma, includes caring for the earth. Sadhguru often points to these old texts to show that caring for nature is not a modern invention. He says that the ancient sages already knew that the health of the body, the mind, and the planet are linked. Modern thinkers have also spoken about this link. The environmental philosopher Aldo Leopold wrote about a yogic that asks people to see themselves as members of a community that includes soil, water, and plants. He argued that ethical behavior must extend beyond humans. Sadhguru echoes this idea, but he adds a spiritual tone. He says that the planet is a living being that can feel our actions. He does not use the word sentient in a scientific sense, but he uses it to help people feel a personal connection. One of Sadhguru's main arguments is that personal habits shape the larger environment. He tells a story about a family that decided to cut down on waste at home. The parents started sorting trash into recyclables, compost, and landfill. The children learned to use cloth bags instead of plastic. Over a few months, the family's waste dropped by half. The parents noticed that they felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. They said that the change in their home made them think more clearly about other choices, like using less water or driving less. This story shows how a small change at home can ripple outward. Another story Sadhguru shares is about a school that created a garden project. The school's teachers asked students to plant seedlings in a small plot behind the building. The children watered the plants, pulled weeds, and watched the seedlings grow into vegetables. The project taught the students where food comes from. It also gave them a sense of responsibility for the land. The school reported that the students began to keep the classroom tidy and to talk about recycling. The garden became a living lesson in how caring for the earth can improve focus and calm. These two examples illustrate Sadhguru's claim that personal well-being improves when the environment is cared for, and that caring for the environment improves personal well-being. He often uses a simple analogy. A garden and a mind are alike. If a garden is full of weeds, the plants cannot grow. If the mind is full of worry, clear thoughts cannot appear. By weeding the garden, one creates space for healthy growth. By weeding the mind, one creates space for peace. Sadhguru's campaigns bring these ideas into the public sphere. One of his most visible projects is the River Clean Up movement. In 2015, a major event took place on the Kaveri River. The river had been polluted by industrial waste and sewage. Local people complained that the water smelled bad and that fish were dying. Sadhguru's organization gathered volunteers, set up cleaning stations, and invited families to bring trash they found along the banks. Over the weekend, thousands of kilograms of waste were removed. After the clean-up, the water looked clearer and the smell lessened. The volunteers reported feeling proud and hopeful. Sadhguru said that the clean water would help the people who drink and bathe in the river, and that the act of cleaning would also lift the spirit of the community. Another campaign focuses on forest planting. Sadhguru's Isha Foundation runs a program called Project Green Earth. The goal is to plant trees in areas that have been cleared for agriculture or development. In one village, the program helped plant 10,000 saplings of native species. The villagers were taught how to water and protect the young trees. After a few years, the saplings grew into a small forest. The villagers noticed that the soil stayed cooler, that rain fell more regularly, and that birds returned. They also said that the forest gave them a place to sit, think, and pray. Sadhguru uses this story to show that planting trees can improve climate, soil health, and mental calm. These real-world actions are supported by modern science. Researchers have found that spending time in green spaces reduces stress hormones. Studies also show that communities with more trees have lower rates of heart disease. The link between a clean environment and better health is not just a spiritual claim. It has measurable effects. Sadhguru's message fits this data, but he frames it in a way that is easy for many people to understand. Not everyone accepts Sadhguru's approach without question. Some critics call his environmental work a publicity stunt. They argue that large events, like river clean-ups, are staged to draw media attention. They point out that after the event, the river can become polluted again if the underlying sources of waste are not stopped. One critic wrote, "A single weekend of cleaning does not replace the need for strict regulations on factories." This criticism suggests that the visible actions may hide a lack of deeper change. Another line of criticism comes from skeptics who say that spiritual talk can distract from policy action. They claim that talking about inner peace and the soul may make people feel that they have already done enough, so they do not push for stronger laws on emissions or waste management. A policy analyst noted, when leaders talk about personal transformation, governments may feel less pressure to act. This view warns that focusing on personal habits could shift responsibility away from corporations and governments. Sadhguru responds to these concerns by saying that personal change and policy change are not separate. He argues that a society made of people who respect the earth is more likely to demand better laws. He often quotes a line from the ancient text, "When the heart is pure, the tongue speaks truth." He interprets this to mean that inner purity leads to honest public discourse. He also points to the fact that many of his volunteers later become activists who lobby for stricter environmental rules. In this way, the personal and the political feed each other. Historical anecdotes help to ground the discussion. One such story comes from a traditional village in South India that practiced tree worship. In that village, a large banyan tree stood at the center of the settlement. The villagers believed that the tree housed a spirit that protected the community. They held a small ceremony every year, offering fruit and flowers to the tree. In return, the tree provided shade, fruits, and a place for children to play. When the village faced a drought, the elders reminded everyone to respect the tree, to avoid cutting branches, and to plant new saplings. The community's respect for the tree helped them conserve water and soil, and the village survived the drought. This anecdote shows how a spiritual practice can lead to practical ecological care. Another anecdote is the 2015 Kaveri River event mentioned earlier. Before the clean-up, a group of local elders gathered and performed a simple prayer by the riverbank. They sang a song that asked the river to stay clean for future generations. The prayer was not a political statement, but a cultural act that reminded the people of their bond with the water. After the clean-up, the elders said that the river felt lighter, a metaphor that matched the physical removal of waste. This story illustrates how a spiritual gesture can inspire concrete action. Modern interpretations of Sadhguru's ideas blend his spiritual language with contemporary environmental thought. Some scholars call his approach eco-spirituality. They note that by framing ecological care as a path to inner peace, Sadhguru makes the idea appealing to people who may not be motivated by politics alone. Others point out that his use of large public events creates a sense of community, which is a key factor in sustaining long-term change. In recent years, several cities have invited Sadhguru's volunteers to help with local clean-up drives. The volunteers bring not only labor, but also a calm presence that encourages others to join. Analogies help to make the concepts clear. One analogy Sadhguru uses is that of a house. He says that a house with a leaky roof will eventually collapse if the leaks are not fixed. The roof represents the planet's atmosphere. The leaks are the pollutants we release. If the family fixes the roof, the house stays safe. If they ignore the leaks, the house will become unsafe for the family. The same logic applies to the earth. By fixing the leaks, people protect their own home. Another analogy compares the planet to a body. In this picture, the lungs are the forests, the heart is the river, and the brain is the sky. When the lungs are full of smoke, the whole body suffers. When the heart is clogged, the blood cannot flow. When the brain is clouded, clear thinking is impossible. By keeping each part clean, the whole body works well. This simple picture helps listeners see how each part of nature is linked to human health. The stories, analogies, and campaigns all point to a central claim. Personal well-being and planetary health are tightly linked. When a person feels calm, they are more likely to act kindly toward the earth. When the earth is healthy, people can breathe easier, think clearer, and enjoy life more fully. This claim is reinforced by the family that reduced waste, the school garden, the Kaveri clean-up, and the tree planting program. The counter-arguments raise important points. Critics remind listeners that single events do not replace long-term regulation. Skeptics warn that spiritual language can be used to avoid hard political choices. These concerns are not dismissed lightly. Sadhguru acknowledges that policy is needed, but he also says that policy is more likely to be strong when the public cares deeply about the earth. He cites a quote from a village elder: "When the people love the river, they will not let anyone pollute it." This quote shows that love for nature can become a force for political change. The discussion of nature, ecology, and spirituality sets the stage for the next part of the video, which looks at social impact. The same ideas that connect personal health to planetary health also connect to how societies treat each other. If people learn to respect the earth, They may also learn to respect each other. The river cleanup, for example, brought people from different castes and ages together to work side by side. The school garden taught children to share responsibilities and to celebrate the harvest together. These social bonds are a natural extension of the ecological work. In summary, Sadhguru's view is that caring for the planet is not a separate duty from caring for oneself. He draws on ancient texts, modern science, real-world projects, and simple stories to make his point. He invites families to cut waste, schools to grow food, villages to worship trees, and cities to clean rivers. He also welcomes criticism, noting that personal change and policy must walk together. The historical anecdotes of tree worship and the 2015 Kaveri event give depth to his message. The analogies of a house and a body help listeners picture the link. All of these pieces will lead into the next discussion on how ecological care can shape social change and how a healthier planet can support a healthier society. Sadhguru often says that science and spirituality are two ways of looking at the same mystery. He says that science studies the outer world, while spirituality studies the inner world. In a calm voice, he explains that both are needed for a full picture of life. He repeats the idea that the two are not enemies but partners. This idea appears many times in his talks, in his books, and in his interviews with scientists. In a 2012 TEDx talk, he stood on a small stage and spoke to a crowd of curious people. He began by asking why people separate the mind from the body. He said that the brain is a tool that can be used for both science and inner work. He told the audience that a child who learns about magnets is already doing a tiny experiment. The child sees a metal spoon stick to a fridge. The child wonders why. The child learns that invisible forces can pull objects together. Sadhguru says this moment is the first glimpse of a scientific mind. At the same time, the child feels a sense of wonder. That feeling, he says, is the seed of spirituality. He uses another simple picture of a chef who experiments with fermentation. The chef watches dough rise. The chef knows that yeast eats sugar and gives off gas. He measures temperature and time. He also watches the dough change shape and smell. The chef feels a quiet joy as the dough becomes bread. Sadhguru says the chef is mixing science with art. The chef uses knowledge of biology and chemistry, but also trusts his sense of taste and intuition. That mix, he says, is the same mix that scientists and mystics share. Sadhguru has spoken with many scientists. He has sat down with physicists, biologists, and engineers. In one conversation with a quantum physicist, he talked about the observer effect. The observer effect says that the act of measuring can change what is being measured. He said that this idea sounds a lot like meditation. When a person watches their own thoughts, the thoughts can change. He quoted a scientist who said, "When you look at a particle, you change its state." He added, "When you look inside yourself, you change your state." He uses that quote to show that science and inner practice meet in a simple way. He also mentioned the work of Albert Einstein. He said Einstein showed that space and time are linked. He said that this link is a reminder that everything is connected. He does not claim that Einstein was a mystic, but he says that Einstein's ideas open a door for spiritual thought. He also refers to the work of Richard Feynman, who once said that if you cannot explain something in simple words, you do not really understand it. Sadhguru uses that line to argue that both science and spirituality should be clear and simple. The relationship between science and spirituality is not without critics. One common criticism is that Sadhguru's references to science are too simple. Some scholars say that he takes complex ideas like quantum physics and turns them into easy sayings. They argue that this can mislead people who are not trained in science. They point out that the observer effect in quantum physics is a technical result that applies to very small particles, not to thoughts or feelings. They say that using that idea for inner work stretches the original meaning. A second criticism says that spirituality can hold back scientific progress. Some scientists worry that spiritual ideas may discourage questioning. They claim that if people believe everything has a hidden purpose, they may stop looking for natural explanations. They cite examples where religious belief slowed the acceptance of new theories, such as the resistance to evolution in the past. They ask whether mixing spirituality with science might create more confusion than clarity. Sadhguru answers the first criticism by saying that the goal of his language is to make ideas reachable. He says that a child does not need a textbook to feel wonder. He says that if a complex idea can be shared in a simple story, it can help more people think. He also says that he never claims to be a scientist. He says he only uses scientific language as a bridge. He repeats a line from his own talk. Science gives the map, spirituality gives the compass. He answers the second criticism by pointing to real-world work where spiritual practice supports science. He mentions doctors who use meditation to reduce stress in patients. He cites studies that show mindfulness can lower blood pressure. He says that when a patient relaxes, the body heals faster. He also talks about farmers who use ancient planting rituals alongside modern irrigation. He says that these farmers notice healthier soil and better yields. He links this to the ecology section, where he explained how respect for the earth can lead to sustainable practices. He also links it to the practice section, where he described daily breathing exercises that improve focus. One modern interpretation of his view is found in the field of neurotheology. Researchers study how the brain reacts during meditation. They find that certain brain waves become more stable. They say that this stability can improve learning. This matches Sadhguru's claim that inner work can sharpen the mind for scientific study. Another modern take is in the field of quantum biology. Scientists explore how quantum effects might help birds navigate. They see that life can use tiny particles in ways that look like quantum physics. This, they say, shows that nature already blends the inner and outer worlds. A real-world example of this blend can be seen in a hospital that offers yoga classes to patients with heart disease. The hospital reports that patients who attend the classes have fewer readmissions. The doctors say that the breathing exercises lower stress hormones. This matches Sadhguru's teaching that breath work can calm the nervous system. Another example is a tech company that lets engineers take short meditation breaks. The engineers report more creative ideas after the breaks. The company says that the practice leads to better problem solving. This shows how a simple inner practice can help scientific work. A historical anecdote adds depth to the story. In 2012, Sadhguru gave a TEDx talk in Vancouver. He spoke to a crowd that included many engineers and scientists. He told a story about a boy who tried to lift a heavy stone. The boy could not lift it until he learned to use a lever. Sadhguru said that the lever is like a tool of knowledge. He said that science is the lever that helps lift heavy ideas. He also said that spirituality is the mind that knows how to place the fulcrum. The audience laughed, but many left with a new image of how the two fields work together. Another anecdote involves a meeting with a Nobel laureate in chemistry. The laureate, who won the prize for work on catalytic reactions, met Sadhguru at a conference in India. The laureate said that the chemistry of life is full of hidden patterns. He told Sadhguru that his own meditation practice helped him stay focused during long experiments. Sadhguru replied, "The mind is like a laboratory." He said that when the mind is clean, it can see the hidden patterns more clearly. The Nobel laureate later wrote in a letter, "The quiet moments of inner work often give the spark for a breakthrough." This short note is quoted by Sadhguru in later talks. Sadhguru also refers to a quote from the ancient text of the Upanishads. "As the river flows, so does the mind." He uses this line to show that the mind can be guided like water. He pairs it with a modern quote from the physicist Niels Bohr. "We must be clear that when it comes to atoms, language can be a poor tool." He says that both quotes remind us that words can only point, not fully capture reality. He uses this to argue that both science and spirituality need humility. The conversation with scientists often includes a question about the limits of knowledge. Sadhguru says that science has limits because it only looks at the outer world. He says that spirituality looks at the inner world, where the mind can sense things that are not yet measured. He gives the example of a child who feels the presence of a pet that has died. The child may sense something beyond the five senses. Sadhguru says that this feeling is a hint that reality is larger than what instruments can capture. Critics say that this line of thinking can lead to pseudoscience. They point to people who claim that meditation can cure diseases without medicine. They warn that such claims can be dangerous. Sadhguru acknowledges the risk. He says that inner practice should not replace medical treatment. He repeats a line from his own writing. "Use the tools of science for the body and the tools of inner work for the mind." He stresses that the two should work side by side. In the ecology section of the larger series, Sadhguru talked about how humans have damaged the planet. He said that deeper respect for nature can come from inner awareness. He linked that idea to his view on science. He said that science can tell us how ecosystems work, but spirituality can tell us why we should protect them. He gave the example of a forest that is cut down for timber. Science can calculate the loss of carbon. Spirituality can feel the loss of a living home. Together, the two views can inspire better policies. In the practice section, Sadhguru described a simple breathing technique called inner engineering. He said that the practice can calm the nervous system in minutes. He linked that practice to better focus in scientific work. He said that when a researcher can quiet the mind, they can see the data more clearly. He gave the analogy of a camera lens that is cleaned before taking a picture. The cleaner the lens, the sharper the image. He said the breath practice cleans the inner lens. Modern scientists have begun to test some of these ideas. A study at a university measured the performance of students who practiced a 5-minute breathing exercise before a math test. The students who practiced showed higher scores than those who did not. The researchers wrote, "A brief pause for breath can improve concentration." This result matches Sadhguru's claim that inner work can boost mental clarity. Another study looked at engineers who used mindfulness to reduce stress during project deadlines. The engineers reported lower burnout and higher satisfaction. The study concluded that mindfulness can be a useful tool in high-pressure technical environments. Sadhguru also talks about quantum physics in a way that many find appealing. He says that the idea of particles being both wave and particle shows that reality can have two sides at once. He says that this is similar to how a person can be both a thinker and a feeler. He quotes a physicist who said, "The universe is not made of things, but of relationships." He uses that line to argue that both science and spirituality study relationships, one between matter, the other between mind and matter. A second everyday example helps to illustrate his point. Imagine a child playing with a magnet and a paperclip. The child sees the paperclip jump toward the magnet. The child learns that invisible forces can act at a distance. The child also feels a sense of magic. Sadhguru says that the magic feeling is the seed of spiritual curiosity. He says that if the child later learns about electrons, the child will see that the same invisible force is explained by science. The child then sees that the magic and the science are two ways of naming the same thing. Another everyday example is the chef who watches fermentation. The chef adds salt to cabbage and watches it turn into sauerkraut. The chef knows that bacteria turn sugar into acid. He also trusts his sense of smell to know when it is ready. Sadhguru says that the chef uses both measurement and intuition. He says that this is a model for how science and spirituality can work together. He points out that the chef's intuition is like a scientist's hypothesis, and the measurement is like an experiment. The conversation about science and spirituality also includes the idea of purpose. The calm that Sadhguru often speaks of is not a distant dream. It is a habit that can be built in a few minutes each day, in the practice called inner engineering. The idea is that the mind and body become one when breath is used as a bridge. The following guide shows how a simple 3-minute breathing exercise and a short meditation before meals can become part of a daily routine. The guide also shows how these steps fit into the larger theme of self-identity that appears earlier in the series. The first step is to find a place to sit. It does not have to be a special chair. A simple stool, a cushion on the floor, or even a sturdy chair works. The posture should be upright but relaxed. The spine is straight, shoulders are down, and the chin is slightly tucked. The eyes can be closed or softly focused on a point in front of the face. This posture helps the lungs expand fully and the mind stay alert. The second step is to set a timer for 3 minutes. The timer is a gentle reminder, not a pressure. When the timer starts, the person begins to notice the breath. The breath is the focus, not the thoughts. The guide asks the person to inhale through the nose for a count of 4, hold for a count of 2, and exhale through the nose for a count of 6. The longer exhale helps calm the nervous system. The pattern is repeated for the whole 3 minutes. If the mind wanders, the person simply notes the thought and returns to the count. The act of returning is the practice itself. The third step comes after the breathing. The person gently shifts attention to the feeling of the breath inside the body. The chest rises, the belly expands, the air feels cool on the inhale and warm on the exhale. This moment of body awareness is a bridge to the next practice. A short meditation before meals. Before each meal, the person takes a pause of about 1 minute. The pause begins with a simple question. Am I hungry for food, or am I hungry for something else? This question helps separate true physical hunger from emotional cravings. The person then places a hand on the heart and breathes slowly, feeling the heartbeat. The person repeats a short mantra, a phrase Sadhguru often uses. I am here now. The mantra is spoken silently, not aloud. The person lets the words settle like a stone dropped in water. The ripple of the thought fades, leaving a calm center. After the minute, the person begins the meal with gratitude, saying a short thanks for the food. These two practices are short enough to fit into a busy schedule, yet they create a ripple effect that lasts throughout the day. The breathing exercise clears the mind before a stressful event. The pre-meal meditation sets a tone of presence for the rest of the afternoon. Both practices are linked to the larger idea of inner engineering, where the goal is to engineer one's inner world so that external events no longer cause turbulence. A student named Arjun faced a big exam. The night before, his mind raced with doubts. He remembered the 3-minute breath. He sat on his bed, set a timer, and began the count. In the first minute, his heart slowed. In the second, his thoughts stopped swirling. In the third, he felt a quiet focus. The next morning, Arjun walked into the exam hall with a steady breath. He answered questions calmly, and his score reflected the calm he had cultivated. The simple breath turned a nervous night into a confident day. A parent named Maya helped her son get ready for bedtime. The house was noisy, and the child was restless. Maya remembered the short meditation before meals, but she adapted it for bedtime. She sat on the edge of the bed, placed a hand on her heart, and whispered, "I am here now." She breathed slowly, feeling the rise and fall of her chest. Within a minute, the room felt softer. Her son sensed the calm, settled into his blankets, and fell asleep without a fight. Maya's brief practice turned a chaotic bedtime into a peaceful one. Some people argue that such short practices cannot bring real change. They say that a 3-minute breath is too brief to alter deep habits. The guide acknowledges this concern. The point, however, is not to replace longer work, but to create a seed. A seed can grow into a tree if it is watered regularly. The 3-minute breath is the water. Over weeks, the habit builds a stronger foundation. Studies on mindfulness show that even a few minutes a day can lower stress hormones. The argument that short practices are ineffective forgets the power of consistency. Another common objection is that busy people cannot find even a minute for these steps. The guide hears this worry. The answer lies in seeing the practices as part of existing routines, not as extra tasks. The 3-minute breath can replace a short scroll on a phone. The pre-meal meditation can be done while waiting for water to boil. By weaving the practices into moments that already exist, no extra time is needed. The result is a day that feels less rushed, not more crowded. History offers examples of short practices making a big impact. The first recorded meditation session in a school took place in a small village in the early 1900s. A teacher named Ravi introduced a 5-minute quiet time at the start of each class. The students sat with eyes closed, focusing on their breath. Within weeks, the class showed better attention and fewer disruptions. The practice spread to nearby schools, showing that even a brief pause could change a whole learning environment. In another story, a community center in a bustling city adopted the 3-minute breath as part of its after-school program. The center's director, Leela, noticed that many teens left the program feeling stressed. She introduced a 3-minute breathing circle at the end of each session. The teens sat in a circle, counted their breaths together, and then shared how they felt. Over months, the teens reported lower anxiety and stronger friendships. The center's success inspired other community groups to try the same routine. These anecdotes illustrate how a simple practice can ripple outward, affecting many lives. Sadhguru often says, "The breath is the most direct path to the mind." This quote captures the core idea behind the exercises. Another quote from Sadhguru's talks reads, "When you pause before you eat, you give the mind a chance to settle, and the body can receive the food with gratitude." Both statements reinforce the link between breath, pause, and calm. The guide now outlines the step-by-step routine in plain language. First, find a quiet spot. Second, sit upright, shoulders relaxed. Third, set a timer for 3 minutes. Fourth, inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6. Fifth, notice thoughts and let them drift away. Sixth, after the timer, open the eyes gently. Seventh, before each meal, stop for 1 minute. Place a hand on the heart, breathe slowly. Repeat the phrase, "I am here now." Ninth, express gratitude for the food. 10th, eat mindfully, chewing slowly and noticing flavors. Each step can be practiced alone or together. The breathing exercise can be done in the morning, before work, or before a meeting. The pre-meal meditation can be done at breakfast, lunch, or dinner. The flexibility makes the routine fit any schedule. Linking back to inner engineering, these practices are the practical side of the theory presented earlier. Inner engineering teaches that the body, mind, and emotions are like 3 gears in a machine. When one gear spins too fast, the whole machine rattles. Breath is the oil that smooths the gears. By using breath consciously, the person engineers the inner machine to run smoothly. The self-identity section explained that the true self is not the thoughts that come and go, but the still space behind them. The short meditation before meals invites the person to sit in that still space, even for a minute. Over time, the still space becomes more familiar, and the person feels less identified with fleeting emotions. To illustrate the power of a single breath, imagine a pond. When a stone is thrown, the water ripples outward. If the stone is small, the ripples are gentle and fade quickly. If the stone is large, the ripples travel far and disturb everything. The 3-minute breath is like a gentle stone. It creates a small, calming ripple that spreads through the mind. The pre-meal pause is like a pause before another stone is thrown. It allows the water to settle, so the next ripple starts from calm water. Another analogy compares the practice to tuning a guitar. A guitar that is out of tune sounds harsh. A musician spends a few minutes tightening each string before a performance. The 3-minute breath is the tuning. It brings the inner strings back into harmony. The short meditation before meals is the final check before the song begins. Both steps ensure that the performance of the day is in tune. Real-world applications extend beyond exams and bedtime. A driver can use the 3-minute breath before a long commute, reducing road rage. A nurse can pause before entering a patient's room, allowing compassion to flow without burnout. A writer can breathe before starting a draft, letting ideas emerge without self-criticism. In each case, the brief practice creates a pause that changes the quality of the action that follows. Critics who claim the practices are too time-consuming often forget that the world is already filled with idle moments. A person waiting for a bus, standing in line, or watching a loading screen can use those seconds for breath. By reframing idle time as practice time, the routine does not add to the schedule. It reshapes the schedule. The counter-argument that short practices are ineffective also overlooks the science of habit formation. Research shows that a habit can form after as few as 21 days of consistent action. The 3-minute breath, done daily, meets the threshold for habit formation. Once the habit is set, the brain begins to fire the calm response automatically, even without the timer. The initial effort is small, but the long-term payoff is large. The historical anecdotes reinforce that the practice is not a modern fad. The school meditation in the early 1900s showed that teachers recognized the need for calm in learning. The community center story showed that groups of teenagers responded positively to a brief collective breath. Both cases prove that short, shared moments of breath can change the atmosphere of a group, not just the individual. Returning to the theme of self-identity, the guide reminds the viewer that the true self is not the stress that builds up during the day. The true self is the quiet observer that watches breath and thoughts. By returning to breath, the observer becomes stronger. The phrase, "I am here now," is a reminder that the self lives in the present, not in the past worries or future plans. The practice trains the mind to stay in the present, which is the core of Sadhguru's teaching on self-identity. In practice, a person might notice that after a week of using the 3-minute breath, they feel less jittery before a presentation. They might notice that after a month of the pre-meal pause, they eat less mindlessly and feel more satisfied. These small changes add up, creating a calmer life. The guide also suggests a way to track progress without turning the practice into a chore. After each breathing session, the person can write a single word in a notebook: calm, restless, focused, or distracted. Over weeks, the pattern will show improvement. The same can be done after meals: grateful, rushed, satisfied, or indifferent. The notebook becomes a quiet record of the inner shift. Sadhguru's quote, "When you become aware of your breath, you become aware of the source of life," can serve as a mantra for the practice. The person can repeat this line silently during the breath count, letting it anchor the mind. The quote ties the simple. The story of Sadhguru's social impact begins with a simple question that many seekers asked when they first heard his talks. How can a teaching that talks about inner peace also help a child learn to read or a river to stay clean? The answer grew out of a belief that inner change and outer change are linked. This belief was not new. It can be traced back to ancient Indian sages who said that a calm mind can move a mountain. In modern terms, the idea is that personal growth can become a tool for community building. Sadhguru took this old idea and gave it a modern shape. He turned it into programs that aim to lift people out of poverty, to protect the environment, and to bring people together in shared purpose. The first major step was the launch of the Isha Vidya schools in 2007. The story started in a small village in Tamil Nadu where a group of teachers struggled to keep a school open. They lacked books, computers, and even a proper roof. Sadhguru visited the village and listened to the teachers. He said that education is not just about facts, but about giving a child a sense of purpose. He promised to build schools that would provide free education, healthy meals, and a space for meditation. Within a year, the first Isha Vidya school opened its doors. The building was modest, but the walls were filled with bright colors and a quiet room for inner practice. The school quickly became a beacon for nearby families. Children who had never seen a computer learned to type, and they also learned to sit in silence for a few minutes each day. The school's success spread, and today there are more than 80 Isha Vidya schools across India, serving thousands of children. A second key moment came in 2017 with the Rally for Rivers campaign. The idea was simple: bring people together to protect India's rivers, which were drying up due to overuse and pollution. Sadhguru spoke at village meetings, at city halls, and on television. He explained that a river is like a living being that needs respect and care. He invited volunteers to plant trees along riverbanks, to clean up trash, and to lobby local officials for better water policies. The campaign grew into a national movement, with thousands of volunteers joining the effort. The rally showed that a spiritual leader could mobilize people for a cause that touches everyone's daily life. These two projects illustrate the core of Sadhguru's community work. They both start with a clear need: education for the poor, clean water for the thirsty. And they both use a mix of inner practice and outer action. The inner practice is the meditation or the quiet time that each participant spends each day. The outer action is the building of a school, the planting of a tree, the cleaning of a riverbank. The combination creates a feedback loop. When a child feels calm, they learn better. When a community feels calm, they work together more effectively. Everyday examples bring this idea closer to home. In a quiet suburb of Bangalore, a group of neighbors organized a clean-up of their local park after hearing about the rally for rivers. They gathered in the early morning, each carrying a bag and a pair of gloves. They talked about the importance of keeping the air and water clean, and they sang a simple chant that Sadhguru had taught them. By the end of the day, the park was free of litter, and the volunteers felt a sense of pride. They said that the act of cleaning together reminded them of a family cleaning a house. The shared effort built trust among the neighbors, and they promised to meet again next month. In another city, a youth club called Peace Circle began using short meditation sessions before school. The club was started by a teacher who had attended an Isha Yoga Center workshop. She noticed that bullying was a problem in her school. She introduced a 5-minute breathing exercise at the start of each class. The students learned to focus on their breath, to notice their thoughts, and to let go of anger. Over a few weeks, the number of bullying incidents dropped. The students reported that they felt calmer and more aware of each other's feelings. The club's success spread to other schools, showing how a simple inner practice can change the social dynamics of a group. These examples are not isolated. They echo the earlier sections on ecology and science, where Sadhguru argued that the mind and the planet are linked. The same logic applies. A calm mind can inspire actions that protect the environment, and a healthy environment can support a calm mind. The Isha Vidya schools, for instance, include lessons on sustainable living. Children learn to plant a tree, to recycle, and to understand the science of water cycles. The science part is not presented as a cold lecture, but as a story of how the river that runs near their school gives them water, food, and a place to play. The story ties the scientific facts to the spiritual feeling of gratitude. Key thinkers who helped shape this approach include not only Sadhguru himself, but also educators like Maria Montessori, who believed that learning should involve the whole child, and environmentalists like Vandana Shiva, who stressed the connection between culture and nature. Sadhguru often quotes these thinkers in his talks. He once said, "When a child learns to read, the world opens. When that child learns to sit in stillness, the world deepens." This line blends the Montessori idea of holistic education with the ancient Indian practice of meditation. It also reflects a modern scientific view that mindfulness can improve cognitive function. The arguments in favor of Sadhguru's community work focus on tangible results. The Isha Vidya schools report higher attendance rates than nearby government schools. Test scores in math and language have risen steadily. Health indicators, such as nutrition and hygiene, have also improved. The rally for rivers has led to the planting of over 2 million trees along riverbanks, according to official reports. Water flow measurements in some regions have shown a modest increase after the campaign's interventions. Supporters argue that these numbers prove that spiritual ideas can be turned into real social benefits. However, critics raise two main counterpoints. The first group says that the programs serve more as branding for Sadhguru and his organization than as genuine public service. They point to the glossy videos, the high-profile media appearances, and the donation drives that often follow a successful campaign. One critic wrote, "The schools are impressive, but they also keep the name of the founder in the public eye, turning charity into advertisement." This view suggests that the underlying motive may be self-promotion rather than pure altruism. The second group of skeptics argues that spiritual groups should stay out of public policy. They worry that when a spiritual leader starts to influence water management, education, or disaster response, the line between faith and governance becomes blurred. A journalist once asked, "Should a teacher of yoga decide how a river is managed?" The skeptic's concern is that policy decisions require expertise in law, economics, and engineering, not just spiritual insight. They fear that relying on a charismatic leader could sideline democratic processes and professional expertise. Both counter-arguments have merit and deserve careful thought. The branding critique raises the question of transparency. If a program is funded by donations, donors deserve to know how the money is used. The answer from the Isha Foundation's financial reports is that a large share of the funds goes directly to building classrooms, hiring teachers, and providing meals. The reports also show that a portion is used for outreach and communication, which some call branding. The organization argues that sharing the story helps attract more support, which in turn helps more people. The line between storytelling and self-promotion can be thin, but the impact on the ground can still be positive. The policy critique touches on the role of expertise. In the case of the Rally for Rivers, the campaign worked with local engineers, hydrologists, and government officials. The volunteers did not decide water allocation. They raised awareness, planted trees, and pressed officials to enforce existing laws. The campaign's success relied on a partnership between spiritual motivation and technical knowledge. This model shows that a spiritual movement can complement, rather than replace, professional expertise. Historical anecdotes illustrate how these tensions played out in real life. One story comes from the launch of the first Isha Vidya school in the village of Vellore. The village chief was initially skeptical. He asked, "Why should we trust a new school when the old one has been here for decades?" Sadhguru answered by inviting the chief to sit with the children during a meditation session. The children sat quietly, eyes closed, breathing together. The chief felt a calm he had not experienced before. He later said, "I saw the peace in their faces. I believed that this school could bring more than books." The school opened, and within 2 years, literacy rates in the village rose by 15%. The chief's change of heart became a local legend, often told to illustrate how inner calm can open the mind to new possibilities. Another anecdote involves a town called Kola, which faced a severe flood in 2018. The flood came after weeks of heavy rain, and the river burst its banks, washing away homes and crops. In the aftermath, Sadhguru visited the town and spoke to the survivors. He said, "When the water rises, the heart must stay still." He encouraged the townspeople to organize a clean-up, to rebuild homes together, and to plant trees that could hold the soil. The volunteers formed a community group called river guardians. They cleared debris, repaired bridges, and planted saplings along the riverbank. Within a year, the town's flood damage decreased, and the residents reported a stronger sense of belonging. The story is often cited as proof that a spiritual message can turn a disaster into a catalyst for community resilience. These anecdotes also tie back to the earlier discussion of ecology. The planting of trees after the flood is a direct application of ecological science. Trees stabilize soil, reduce runoff, and improve water absorption. The meditation practice helped the volunteers stay calm under pressure, allowing them to work efficiently. The combination of science and inner practice created a powerful response to a natural crisis. Modern interpretations of Sadhguru's community work often frame it as social entrepreneurship. In this view, the founder creates programs that aim for both social good and financial sustainability. The Isha Vidya schools, for example, operate on a model where donations fund the core costs, while small fees for extra services help maintain the facilities. This model is praised for being scalable, because it does not rely solely on charity. Critics, however, warn that any profit motive can shift the focus away from the original spiritual intent. The debate continues in academic circles, with some scholars noting that the blend of spiritual guidance and entrepreneurial structure is a sign of the times, where religious movements adapt to modern economies. Analogies help clarify these ideas. Imagine a garden. The soil represents the community's basic needs: food, shelter, education. The seeds are the ideas and skills that each person brings. Water and sunlight are the policies and resources that help the garden grow. A gardener who only waters the plants but never tills the soil will see limited growth. Similarly, a spiritual teacher who only offers meditation without addressing material needs will see limited impact. Sadhguru's approach tries to tend both the soil and the seeds, using meditation as the gentle rain that nourishes the mind, while schools and river projects act as the tilling and planting that shape the environment. Another analogy compares the community to a musical band. Each instrument has its own sound. Some play the melody, others keep the rhythm. If one instrument plays too loudly, the music becomes chaotic. If the rhythm is missing, the melody drifts. Sadhguru's teachings act like the conductor, helping each instrument listen to the others and stay in time. The conductor does not play the instruments, but guides the group to create harmony. In the same way, the teachings guide volunteers, teachers, and officials to work together, each contributing their part. Quotes from Sadhguru's own words anchor the discussion. In a 2015 talk on service, he said, "Service is not a task to be checked off a list. It is a state of being that flows from a quiet mind." This line captures Sadhguru has become a well-known name in the world of spirituality. He speaks on many topics, from inner peace to climate change. He also runs a large organization that offers courses, books, and online videos. In recent years, many people have begun to ask hard questions about him. This part of the story looks at the main criticisms that have been raised. It also shows how his supporters answer those questions. The tone stays calm and clear, as if a gentle voice is guiding the listener through a busy market of ideas. One of the biggest complaints is about money. Critics say that the Isha Foundation, the group that runs Sadhguru's programs, does not show enough detail about where its funds go. An investigative journalist named Prashant K. wrote a report in 2018 that pointed out missing receipts. He wrote, "The accounts that are publicly available do not explain how millions of dollars are spent on construction, travel and salaries. The report also noted that donors often receive only a short thank you note, not a full breakdown of expenses. This lack of transparency makes some people uneasy. Another point of criticism is Sadhguru's comments on politics. In several public talks, he has spoken about elections, government policies, and even specific leaders. Some observers think his remarks are too close to the ruling party in India. A political analyst named Meera Singh said, "When a spiritual teacher starts to praise a government, it blurs the line between faith and power." Critics worry that followers might be swayed to support a political agenda because of the teacher's influence. The third major area of debate is about science. Sadhguru often talks about health, the environment, and the mind in ways that sound scientific. He has said, "The human body is a machine that can be tuned like a musical instrument." Some scientists argue that this language can be misleading. An academic skeptic, Dr. Arjun Patel, wrote, "There is no peer-reviewed evidence that the techniques Sadhguru promotes can change DNA or reverse aging." He added that many of the claims are not tested in a lab, so they remain ideas rather than proven facts. These three issues, money, politics, and science, are often mentioned together. They form a pattern that many journalists and scholars see as a warning sign. They ask whether a spiritual leader should be allowed to operate without clear answers in these areas. The questions are not new. Throughout history, people have asked similar things about other teachers. For example, in the 1970s, a famous guru in the United States faced lawsuits over how he used donations. The courts asked him to show detailed records. He eventually agreed to publish a yearly report. That case set a standard that many people still use today. The pattern repeats when a new teacher becomes popular. A second historical example comes from the 1990s, when a well-known monk in Japan made statements about the health benefits of a special tea. Scientists tested the tea and found no real effect beyond a placebo. The monk's followers felt hurt, but the public debate helped people understand the need for evidence. Those stories help to frame the current discussion about Sadhguru. Now imagine a shopper in a grocery store. The shopper sees a bottle of oil that says it was blessed by Sadhguru. The label promises better heart health. The shopper stops and asks, "Is there a study that proves this?" The question is simple. It is the same kind of question that a journalist asks when looking at a large donation. The shopper's doubt shows how ordinary people think about claims that mix faith and product. A second relatable scene is that of a voter on election day. The voter remembers a TV interview where Sadhguru praised a candidate for caring about the environment. The voter wonders, does the candidate really care, or is this just a friendly comment? The voter then checks the candidate's record on clean energy. This act of checking facts mirrors the way critics check the background of a spiritual leader. Both examples show how everyday decisions can be influenced by big-name endorsements. Supporters of Sadhguru have strong answers to these criticisms. One common defense is that the Isha Foundation has helped many people. A former student named Ananya told a newspaper, "I came to a program feeling lost. After the week, I felt calmer and more focused. My anxiety dropped." She added that she now volunteers at a school that the foundation runs. Stories like this are used to argue that the positive impact outweighs the need for strict financial reports. Another defense is that spiritual teachers are often misunderstood. A professor of religious studies, Dr. Ravi Menon, wrote, When a guru speaks about politics or science, the words are meant to inspire, not to replace expert advice. He says that many cultures have a tradition of teachers who speak on many subjects. The professor argues that criticism can come from a place that does not recognize this tradition. He suggests that the criticism may miss the larger purpose of the teachings. These defenses do not erase the questions, but they add another layer to the conversation. They remind listeners that real people have found help and hope in the teachings. They also remind that some ideas are meant to be felt, not measured. The balance between proof and feeling is at the heart of many spiritual debates. The earlier part of the video talked about Sadhguru's ideas on science, ecology, and social impact. He has spoken about planting trees, cleaning rivers, and using meditation to reduce stress. Those claims can be checked against data. For instance, the Isha Foundation's Project Green Hands says it has planted over 10 million saplings. Independent reports confirm that many of those trees have survived. This shows a clear link between his words and a measurable result. On the other hand, his statements about the mind changing the weather are harder to test. He once said, "When many people meditate together, the earth feels the calm and the clouds may shift." Scientists say there is no known mechanism for that. The claim remains a belief, not a proven fact. The contrast between the planting project and the meditation weather claim highlights why some people are skeptical while others are hopeful. A 2018 media investigation provides a concrete example of how the criticism unfolded. A team from a national news outlet went to the Isha campus in Tamil Nadu. They asked to see the financial statements for the last 5 years. The foundation offered a summary, but the journalists said the numbers did not match the receipts they had seen from donors. The story was published with the headline, "Mystery Money at a Spiritual Hub." The article sparked a public debate on social media. Some readers called for an audit, while others defended the foundation, saying the journalists were looking for drama. A second real-world incident happened at a university in 2021. The university invited Sadhguru to speak at a public forum on climate change. Students organized a protest, holding signs that read, "Show us the science." During the event, a professor asked, "Can you point to a peer-reviewed study that proves meditation can reduce carbon emissions?" Sadhguru answered, "The heart of the change is in the mind, not in a paper." The audience was split. Some clapped, seeing the answer as a reminder of inner work. Others left, feeling that the question was not answered. The episode was covered by several news sites, adding another layer to the ongoing conversation. Both of these anecdotes show how public scrutiny works. The media investigation focused on money. The university debate focused on scientific claims. Each time, the same pattern emerged. A claim, a question, a response, and a public reaction. The pattern helps the listener see why the criticisms are not isolated incidents, but part of a larger story. The consumer example and the voter example also tie back to these real events. In the grocery store, the shopper might ask for a receipt of the oil's health claim, just as the journalists asked for a receipt of the foundation's spending. In the voting booth, the voter might compare a candidate's record to a teacher's words, just as the professor at the university asked for a study to back a claim. The parallels make the abstract debate feel close to everyday life. Now consider the argument that spiritual leaders are often misunderstood. This view says that people expect a teacher to give hard data on every topic. In many traditions, the teacher's role is to point the student toward inner experience. The teacher may use stories, metaphors, and simple language. When a modern audience asks for scientific proof, the teacher may seem evasive. The misunderstanding can create tension. Supporters say that this tension is not a sign of fraud, but a sign of cultural clash. Another defense points to the measurable good that comes from the programs. The Isha Foundation runs free yoga classes for school children. A study by an independent education group found that children who attended the classes showed better concentration and lower stress scores. The study used simple questionnaires and observed the children over a semester. The results were published in a local education journal. This evidence is used by supporters to argue that the Foundation's work has real value, even if some of the spiritual claims remain untested. Critics, however, ask whether these benefits are unique to the Isha programs or could be achieved by any organized activity. They point out that sports, music, and art also improve concentration and reduce stress. The question becomes whether the spiritual label adds something essential, or whether it is a marketing tag. This line of questioning is common in debates about any large organization that mixes charity with a brand. The discussion also touches on the idea of accountability. In the world of business, companies are required to publish annual reports. In the world of non-profits, similar rules exist, but they are often less strict. When a spiritual leader runs a non-profit that collects huge sums, the public expects a level of openness similar to that of a corporation. The 2018 investigation showed that the Isha Foundation's reporting did not meet those expectations for many observers. On the political side, the question of influence is also about accountability. If a teacher's words can sway voters, then the teacher holds a kind of power. In democratic societies, power is supposed to be checked by transparency. Critics argue that when Sadhguru praises a political leader, he steps into a role that should be subject to the same scrutiny as any public endorsement. Supporters reply that the praise was about the leader's environmental policies, not a campaign endorsement. They say that the line between personal opinion and political campaigning can be blurry. The scientific claims raise a different kind of accountability. In science, a claim is expected to be tested and reproduced. When Sadhguru says that meditation can change the body's chemistry, the claim can be examined in a lab. Some small studies have shown that meditation reduces stress hormones. Those studies are published in peer-reviewed journals, meaning other scientists have checked the work. However, larger claims, such as altering DNA or influencing weather, have not been confirmed. Critics say that presenting such ideas without evidence can mislead people. Supporters argue that the personal experience of many followers is the proof they need. A quote from a primary source helps to illustrate the tension. In a 2020 interview, Sadhguru said, "Science and spirituality are not enemies. They are two ways of looking at the same reality." He added, "When a person feels the truth inside, the outer facts become less important." This statement shows his view that inner feeling can be as valid as external data. A critic, journalist Anil Desai, responded, "Feeling is personal, but money and politics affect everyone. Those need facts." The contrast between the two quotes captures the core of the debate. Another primary quote comes from a supporter. A teacher named Maya Rao wrote in a blog, "I have seen children who could